Hi there, it's Dr. Marcus Busser here. I work at the University of the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, Australia, and I've had the good fortune for many years to be involved with a number of really cool schools of difference. There's the Montessori International College down in Maroochydore in Queensland, and also up in the hinterland there's the River School. And yeah, I've had a long association with both, well over 2 decades each. And I'm currently on the board for both. And one of the things that we've been wrestling with in both contexts actually has been the why. Why do what we do? Why put all this energy into creating alternatives when the mainstream is doing a reasonable job at least? So this is something that I think is a perennial question, but it's also something that's really important to continually come back to, not just as boards, but because boards working with management, central management for the schools, we are, I guess, the origin of the cultures that schools exhibit and live, perform, however you want to think about that. And the question of the why then is something that when we see a parent struggling with, why is my child here? What's going on? I'm not understanding this. That we need to be able to speak to directly and eloquently, even poetically, to give some sort of inspiring bigger picture, a reframe. But also, we all sometimes struggle with the why. We have our dark nights of the soul. Doesn't matter where you are in the continuum. And of course, there's the teacher who's got their nose to the grindstone every day of the week, facing the kids, facing the parents, facing the curriculum demands and so on, and facing also the more abstract, less tangible issues around the kind of visions, ideals and culture that a Montessori school or a Neohumanist school like the River School, or even beyond that, the Steiner vision or the vision of democratic schools. And I've had considerable amounts of to do with both. My kids have been in all of those systems actually. So we ended up deciding at the Montessori school that we needed to do some keen reflecting on this. And this is a little thought bubble, and I want to acknowledge that the Montessori school, we hired Kate from Zest People to come along and wave her magic wand over us, which she did very effectively and is continuing to do so. One of the questions we had in our second session, which was held just yesterday, was, well, what is it that helps you gets you up in the morning? Hello, off we go to work again. Yes, I believe in this. It's not, God, oh my God, that sort of thing. So there is something that, at that level we all share. So in the Montessori school, we have an amazing team of leaders there. There's Sheree Fitton, there's Grant Vero and Larissa Rook, and we sort of sat around the table with various members of the board on the first day, and then the second day, yesterday, it was a smaller group, but we sat there and we worked on this question with Kate. And what was so interesting for me was that the question relates exactly also to the River School and the sorts of issues that we are dealing with there. So this is a very personal reflection. I can't speak for either Montessori school or the River School in that sense, but I do want to get something out, say something about this, because I feel it's really important. So bear with me while I walk us through this thought bubble, okay? So off we go. So first of all, acknowledging Zest People as the sort of instigator of this, and thank you, Kate, for doing what you do. I think you do a great job. So at the Montessori International College, we went on this quest for a why, and we came up with multiple lists actually as we went through the process. So Montessori offers us a theory of mind, whether it's the absorbent mind or the prepared child and so on. And it's a vision that works pedagogically, and it's part of the why. But is it the deep down why? Let's have a think. Well, Montessori gives us this cosmic story, a story of the individual growing in a context, an environment, evolving and looking up at the stars and wondering, and this cosmic story for Montessori is, for me, very, very compelling. But is that the why? Well, it also offers us a belief in the child, a trust. I trust. I've taught in Montessori school for five years. I've taught in the River School in another Neohuman school for 5 years, and I've been involved with the River School for 20-something years, since 1993 or 4, before it even opened its doors. Is that the why? We believe in the child. We believe that the child will learn. Yes, we do. And that's compelling in itself. We have a love of the world. We have a love. And that's really important. Love. I think the best teachers all love what they do, but they don't just love what they do. They love the people they do it with, right? So there's this love there. And it takes, us through some of the more difficult times. I have to agree. Is that the why? We also have an awareness, I've already touched on this in the cosmic story sense, of context in shaping the mind, whether it's the young mind, but also the minds of parents, the minds of the administrative staff, and keenly, obviously, the mind of the teachers as well. Is that it? Montessori, I think, is great in that as a scientist herself, she offers us a scientific method, a scientific approach to observing in the classroom. You have an idea, you put it out there, you test it, the children work on it with you, and you reflect. There is a kind of informed reflexivity in Montessori, which I think is really important. We also have a commitment to culture, and I deliberately wrote it that way, cult. Cult is the practice of something over and over again, okay? And the more that we do it, the more that we, the more that we internalize a whole bunch of these whys. But we had this list up on the board type thing, and we were still going, but are these the things that tie it together? So now I'm going to step back from that for a moment and say, okay, let's jump to the neo-humanist sort of approach at the River School. Those of you who don't know me, I've been working on neo-humanism since 1988 at least. 1988, clearly defined as neo-humanism. Before that, I had a broader commitment to general humanist learning. But what is it about the River School? What are the whys there? Well, neo-humanism, interesting enough, just like mine, provides us with a theory of mind. This is a yogic theory, a spiritual theory of layers of mind. And these, to understand that there's an embodied layer, that there's a sort of an intellectual layer, that there's an aesthetic layer, that there's a supraesthetic layer, which is intuition and so on, and then there's a supraesthetic layer, which is even more subtle, which is very much a spiritual thing. And I'm not saying that Montessori doesn't have that spiritual flavor to it. It's just, of course, that Montessori's paradigm was a early 20th century scientific method paradigm, but she speaks very directly to the spirit nonetheless, and spirit is one of her favorite words. Like Montessori, the Neohumanism offers us a cosmic story. This one grows out of the sort of Hindu tantric worldview of India, and it's based on the Brahmachakra cycle, the cycle of creation, from matter through to life and through to consciousness and back to matter, and that consciousness flows through this. But it's a very elegant and compelling story, just as is the story of the cosmological story that Montessori draws upon in her curriculum. Neohumanism definitely has a belief in the child or the whole person, and we actually yesterday we moved away from the word child and we said, well, it's the person. Actually, we believe in the person wherever we are in that learning continuum. We trust that we learn, and we trust that we learn with the best of intention, and so on. So that's important too. So we had the same thing, and we have a love of the world. Neohumanism is about the love of the world. It is a pedagogy that takes love as the beginning and the end point. It sees love as that which calls us back through that cosmic wheel, the cosmic story there. So it's very strong and powerful there. Is that the why? I keep asking myself. This was going through my head yesterday. This is why I have to get it out in a sense and share it with you guys. There's also an awareness of context, time, place, person, that, the context of culture and civilization, societies, time, placement, your gender, ethnicity, the language available to us, our mother tongue, all of this is informing contextual approaches to thinking about neo-humanism as pedagogy in context. I don't know. To me, it's very exciting. Definitely, the neo-humanism emphasizes rationality, critical theory, critical spirituality is something that I've called it over the years. A critical spiritual approach that basically questions everything and uses the relationship itself as the bedrock for how do we assess the effectiveness, the ethical qualities involved here. There is a scientific method, and it follows the traditional Western scientific method in terms of offering theory and reflection, testing, and open for peer review, and so on. It's Neo-humanism is about culture and cult. It's about the repetitive practices that build our world and build our sense of belonging, actually. Culture is the human response to uncertainty and to a need to belong. It gives us our compass. This is all very exciting, and to me, it says what informs this process, but is it what it gets me up in the morning? So one of the things that excited us around the table yesterday was the sense that education is that which liberates. Oops, I've got to move myself over here. There you go. How's that? Education is that which liberates. Savijajah Vimukte is the Sanskrit for that. It's something that, of course, is, well, I say of course, but you might not know, is part of the neo-humanist philosophy of education. It's part of the neo-humanist pedagogy. The mind is bound. It's bound by culture, it's bound by the prejudices that all cultures inform, and yet the mind has the capacity to free itself through reflection and through what we would say spiritual practice and so on. The spiritual practice is one, meditative in the neo-humanist context. In the Montessori context, it's more reflexive. It's more the spirit of culture, you could say. Nonetheless, both Montessori and neo-humanist principles, the work of Prabhat Ranjan Saka, who offered us neo-humanism as a philosophy to build an education system upon, the sense that human capacity is way more than what we actually realize. And this is what slowed us down towards the very end as we were pushing towards the pointy end of what is it that helps us get up in the morning. Well, if we think about the lists that I offered then just on Montessori and then contrasting it with neo-humanism, it's the exact same list with a slight emphasis in different ways, but still very much the same vision of human potential. What did it all boil down to? It boils down to this. This is what gets us up in the morning. Human potential is limitless. That human beings, as incredibly gifted, incredibly rich, diverse, contrasting, contradictory, perplexing beings, are capable of so much. To understand, so much emphasis on context, that so much of context is bound by the cultural parameters and the life experiences of each one of us. Violence is born out of violence and is born out of a collapse in the sense of relational connection. It's born out of fear, that primal fear that drives us to tribalize, to differentiate. Why? Because evolutionarily, we've actually grown out of a context in which human beings were not the top dogs; we were prey. That primitive primate element of the brain, the amygdala part of the brain, is still ticking away. But at the same time, as spiritual beings, sky's the limit. Culture limits us to also control and manage human capacity, to channelize it. So one of the things that really gets me out of bed in the morning, it has to be this belief in the human potential and the understanding that we long and always will long or yearn for the great, which is a statement from Prabhupada Ranjan Sarkar, the longing for the great. But also that, and as this is the sort of Carl Sagan-y type thing, and Montessori would have felt deeply attuned to this, was that, we are all stardust, that we were at the beginning of the Big Bang. We are all participants in this extraordinary, now it's a human story, but this extraordinary story of cosmos. That whatever it is that's happening around us, the COVID situation at the moment, it looks like the polity of the world is falling to pieces with rising neo-Nazi, nationalist, conservative, mean-minded politics, and grubby politicians who constantly saying fear, 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 and sowing it everywhere. This kind of world that seems to be cracking up, and all the cracks of climate change, it just seems an absolute mess. But is it? What's the purpose here? The purpose is to wake up, to start realizing more and more of our potential. When I think about children, I see them with unbound potential, and I see education actually as generally closing down possibilities to craft a citizen who will fit in. I think we need dangerous citizenship in the most positive sense of the word. I think we need people who are going to take risks on behalf of a better future. I think we need teachers who believe that human potential is limitless. I think we need teachers who can say, let's take the lid off all of this and go, kids, you and I, we're on a learning adventure. Montessori has provided an incredible array of experiences. She's provided us with the most glorious, insights into human potential as learning systems. The same can be said of Prabhupada Ranjan Sarkar, who's given us an incredible system of thinking about human spiritual social evolution, that one cannot go without the other. He makes that explicit. It's implicit in the Montessori approach, but it's still deeply there. And I would have to say that in other education systems that believe in this limitless potential of humanity, the democratic systems, the Steiner system, and so on, the integral school systems from Sri Aurobindo, they all take as a starting point human potential. And that for me is what gets me up in the morning and inspires me. So I had to get this off my chest. So I'm very appreciative. I'm trying to work out how to flick back to this, hopefully you indulge me and listen to this, and maybe you can put some reflections in the comment box down below there, so that I can actually take on board your insights. I could easily have done this much more eloquently and elegantly if I'd given it some thought and written myself a transcript, but I just needed to say it. So thank you very much, and take care.